And you know, but we really have to be sure we're picking the right products. And if anybody has any questions, I'll be out front or later on, and I'd like to pass the mic over to Alan. Thank you.
Before Alan talks, I have a sign-up sheet that's going around, right, Dwayne?
Yes.
Okay. So make sure you guys get that, and Dwayne's going to hand out these flyers too.
Well, again, thank you, everybody. I want to talk to on a couple different levels. One is, before I even started to work at NORML in 1990, I went to a Grateful Dead show, I think it was, in Saratoga Springs in 1989 or 1990, and somebody walked up to me with a pair of shorts on, and the shorts simply said, "Do not smoke these shorts." Now, there are some of us that will remember that those were probably some of the very first hemp clothes that you could buy at the retail level in the United States. And I remember walking up to the person saying, "Well, why would I smoke your shorts?" And he said, "Well, because they're made of hemp." I got no reaction from me. Hemp, I sort of knew what it was. It didn't really, even somebody who had used marijuana my whole life, more or less, before that. So that was my first introduction. Of course, the first day you volunteer at NORML, somebody hands you Jack Herrera's book. And then you can take your education from there. I've tried to read every piece of literature, every legislation, every musing about hemp since I've been at NORML. And one of the things that I find very vexing is it's a nice thing at NORML in the fact that we talk about medical marijuana, we talk about the recreational use of marijuana, and we also talk about hemp. At the same time, I can say that in all the years I've been involved, there's been a balkanization. We used to call it rope versus dope. And I think it still happens to a large degree. As an example, a couple of years ago, Indiana NORML had a booth, as they have always had for 25 years, at the Indiana State Fair. And that year, one of the hemp-only booths was across the way. And after the weekend, they called up NORML, and they were very upset that across the way was Indiana NORML that was talking about medical marijuana and legalizing marijuana, but they also had a hemp oil conversion there as well. In Indiana NORML, because it's a rural state, it's a state that has a lot of agriculture, and because for NORML, prior to the, as I'm describing it here, and this is not a pejorative term, I don't believe, just a strategic term, the balkanization of this discussion between medical only, recreational only, hemp only. So for me at NORML, all these years, it's been like, right, medical, recreational, and hemp. So for me, it's kind of been one easy metaphor. But I understand, believe me, how easy it is to be attracted to wanting the dopers, the legalizers, and now the prominence, the utter prominence of the medical marijuana community in the United States. That somehow or another, we are the enemy of hemp law reform. And on some level, that bubbles up to me and gives me more gray hair than I'd like. At the same time, I totally understand why. Because when you're dealing with the natural constituents of trying to get these products to market, many of the, other than the greening of America, which is clearly happening, the baby boom generation is taking over these companies and capitalizing them, so they're hip to hemp. And when I walked into a fly fishing shop in 1994 and 95 in Orvis and saw a Terra hemp pack, I knew that it had morphed from the world of Grateful Dead and fish shows over to the world of middle-class America. And NORML was one of the many sponsors of the hemp car, and one of my favorite all-time projects, this young couple who got married for their honeymoon. They went across the entire United States and Canada in the hemp car, which was a converted 1982 Mercedes, if I'm not incorrect. And not to get too tangential here, but to speak about how we will look back in history about how anachronistic this whole policy was. They wanted to be at the New Mexico State Fair, which is like in most states, the State Fair is one of the biggest events for the entire state, for many rural parts of the United States. And the New Mexico one is the same. and they wanted to have a booth there. And so NORML and another group kicked down a couple $100 for them to have a booth. And the car pulled in, and they displayed everything. And some New Mexico State Police walked by, and they were like, "Oh, look at this! This is how you convert oil." And they were like, eyes were rolling, and they confiscated the car because they wanted to test to see if the oil in the car got you high. And so they couldn't display the car. Hundreds of thousands of New Mexicans were denied the ability to see a functioning, working car that used hemp. I would think we're going to look back, that'll be one of those marks of just absurdity, that the state confiscated a car that had driven like 3,500, 4,000 miles because they were afraid that this young couple were going to somehow turn on the New Mexico State Fair. So it's vexing to see that over the years, as the DEA and anti-drug groups have conflated hemp with medical marijuana and marijuana. I think we all kind of divided up amongst ourselves quite well. But the federal government and anti-government groups, anti-drug groups, conflate them as being all one and the same. And so while I began this discussion saying, well, NORML's pretty keen on that, these are now very different constituencies entirely. I know that, and I think it just speaks to the maturity we're finally getting to, that we realize that, and that in Washington, D.C. there are now 20 pro-reform groups that are within 2 miles of each other. All have grown from NORML's bosom, usually out of disputes and a need to grow the movement. So for me, hemp has always been just an amazing thing. I went to France in 1992, and I went to a company called Chanvé, House of Hemp. They make the whole house out of a plant that you and I have more or less grown up totally vilified in our lives. The entire house, the cement, the plastering, the boarding, and it works better than any of the other products that are available out there. And so for me, that was it. Jack's book was a wonderful polemical, and Rowan Robinson's, and all Chris Conrad's, and all the ones after that. And the work, the capitalists who got involved based on their work. Men and women who have risked millions and millions of dollars. David Bronner comes immediately to mind. Dr. Bronner, so.
We talked about him earlier.
Bless David.
Yes.
David's one of those folks that can really straddle the line because he's a big supporter of medical marijuana. There are many people in this country who were out on appeal bond for years on a medical charge or even just a regular marijuana charge that he put up the bonds to keep them out of jail, even though he realized that in many board of directors that he serves on in the hemp community, as happened in the 1990s, it was a major purge. When Rear Admiral James Woolsey from the CIA, after he retired and got involved with this, his first thing was he sat down and he went, all you people with long hair, all of you people with a history with NORML, all of you with an advocacy for progressive causes, you need to go away. Largely, that was his message. And they did. They purged Donnie Wirtschafter and the guy that used to run the Pioneer Press up in Minnesota, and a whole bunch of other individuals because they had a history with marijuana law reform. So I think we're getting over that. I think the rope versus dope debate has been largely put aside, but it sometimes rears its head, and for those of you who maybe have never been exposed to it, never thought about it, it's still there bubbling below the surface.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Alan.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, look, I don't have to talk that loud. I'm used to talking really loud, though. I don't need the microphone. My name is Laura Creho, and I'm here as a representative of the Colorado Hemp Initiative Project. Our group began in Colorado in 1992 with an initiative to re-legalize cannabis and hemp in Colorado for industrial, medicinal, and personal use. So we never made a distinction between rope versus dope. In 1992, we ran a ballot initiative, which didn't make it on the ballot. And in 1994, we tried again, and we also didn't make it on the ballot because we didn't have any funding. But those were the first two cannabis initiatives in Colorado, so we're pretty proud of that.